I never thought my own sister could erase me from her wedding invite list until I read the Tough Cuts text and realized I wasn't even an afterthought. So I swapped her big day for a first-class ticket to the Caribbean, champagne in hand, and zero regrets. While she fought with her groom and our family scrambled to pick up the pieces, I was sipping margaritas on a private beach, watching karma unfold like the perfect sunset. Excluded from my sister's wedding, I went on vacation. When the wedding fell apart, my whole family frantically tried to reach me. "You're overreacting. It's just a wedding," my mother said. I was not invited to my own sister's wedding. Instead, I scheduled a trip. Days later, my relatives blew up my phone. I sat there staring at the screen, reading the message for the 5th time. "Hey, just wanted to let you know the guest list is finalized and we had to make some tough cuts. Hope you understand. Love you." Tough cuts. Tough cuts. I wasn't some distant cousin. I wasn't an old family acquaintance they hadn't seen in years. I was her brother. And my sister, the same sister I had assisted through every crisis, heartbreak, and moment of self-doubt, had just cut me out as an afterthought. I glanced at the screen, a slow pang of disbelief spreading through my chest. I nearly laughed. This had to be a mistake. I grabbed the phone and called my mother. She answered on the second ring, her voice upbeat. "Hey, sweetheart. What's up?" I didn't bother with small talk. "Mom, I just got a message from Emily. She says the guest list is finalized and..." "I'm not on it." A pause, long enough to confirm what I'd suspected. "Oh, honey," she sighed, using that tone that always made me feel unreasonable. "It's just a wedding. Don't make a big deal out of it." "Just a wedding," I repeated, feeling my stomach knot. "Mom, I'm her brother. How am I not invited to my own sister's wedding?" She clicked her tongue. "It's not personal. You know how weddings are. Expensive. We had to keep the guest list small." I cut her off. "Mom, I just saw Emily's Instagram post. She invited 150 people. Silence. Then a forced chuckle. "Well, it's costly. They probably assumed..." "You wouldn't mind sitting this one out?" "Wouldn't mind?" I asked, stunned. "Mom, I've been there for Emily through it all. Helped her relocate twice, covered half her rent when she lost her job, got her through her last breakup. Now I'm not good enough to be at her special day?" "Oh, stop being dramatic." My mother sighed. "It's just one day. You're overreacting." I laughed, brief and hollow. "Overreacting, right? I can already predict how this goes. I argue, you shrug me off, Emily offers a half-hearted apology later, and I'm expected to forgive and forget, because I always do. Not this time. Something inside me snapped. Fine. If I'm not worthy of being there, I won't be." I hung up without another word and booked the first flight out. I wasn't going to sit around moping while my sister and the rest of the family played Happy Little Wedding without me. If I wasn't significant enough to be featured, I wasn't significant enough to be present when they needed me. An hour later, I'd reserved an all-inclusive Caribbean suite with an ocean view, spa services, and private beach access. I'd always thought a trip like that was too pricey, until now. This was more than a vacation. It was a statement. When the wedding weekend arrived, I was 30,000 feet up, champagne in hand, legs outstretched in first class. I posted a photo with the caption, "Yes, I got cut from the guest list, but I think I'll survive." Reactions poured in, laughing emojis from cousins. "Good for you." From Aunt Lisa, the only rational one. But the best response came from Mom, who texted 3 times. "Mom, where are you? Are you seriously missing your sister's wedding over this?" "Mom, you're being petty." "Mom, call me." I replied with a single image, white sand beach, crystal blue water, and the caption, "Perfect view." Then I shut off my phone. For the first time in years, I was putting myself first, and it felt incredible. By the time I arrived at the resort, any guilt was gone. The private car ride to the lobby gave me time to reflect. Back home, my family was scrambling. Here, I was the priority. The resort was a dream. Palm trees in the lobby, open-air architecture, cocktails at check-in. My suite boasted floor-to-ceiling windows, a private balcony, and a king-size bed that practically begged for a nap. I dropped my bags, stepped onto the balcony, and took it all in. Then I posted again. When one door closes, another opens, preferably to a beachside suite with unlimited margaritas. I knew it would reach my family, and I wanted it to. Let them taste what it feels like to be left out. My first full day in paradise started with fluffy pancakes, fresh fruit, and coffee so good it ruined all others. Then I lounged by the infinity pool with a martini in hand, watching waves roll in. Late afternoon, my phone buzzed. From Mom, "There's an emergency, call me." From Jake, "Dude, you won't believe what just happened." From Emily, "Please answer, I need you." I smirked. Let them stew. Jake's next text explained everything. "Bro, you dodged a bullet. During the reception, he and Emily had a huge fight, and he walked out. Groom just left the venue, grandma's crying. They even cut the bar early. It's a disaster." I laughed out loud. The family that barred me from the wedding was now blaming me for not saving it. Then Emily's text popped up. Answer me. Please, I need you. I typed back, sorry, I'm a little busy enjoying my overreaction. Hope the wedding was fun. And I blocked her number. The following morning, I awoke to the sound of waves. I stretched, glanced at my phone, still blocked, and deleted all stray voicemails. Mom furious, Emily sobbing, Jake whispering about grandma lecturing everyone. I stepped onto the balcony and ordered breakfast. Fluffy pancakes, fresh fruit, and a mimosa so bright it nearly burned my retinas. I posted, starting my day stress-free. Hope everyone back home is doing okay. I spent the rest of the day on a sunset cruise, the warm breeze washing over me, and capped it off with a 5-star seaside dinner. No family chaos in sight. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I posted one last update. 0 regrets. Then I turned off my phone again. Let them clean up their own messes. The next morning, feeling lighter than in years, I extended my trip by another week. I texted Melissa. You want me around now? Sorry, I'm too busy enjoying my vacation. Have fun cleaning up your own mess, she replied. Iconic. Tell me everything when you get back, whenever that is. I smiled, booked my flights, and blocked any remaining numbers. Then I settled into my cabana, sipped a tropical drink, and thought, no guilt, no tension, just peace. It was the best decision I'd ever made. In our family, when a husband dies, the widow has exactly 40 days to follow him into the afterlife. They call it the Eternal Service Pact because men need servants even after death. I watched my Aunt Ling drink the ceremonial poison at Uncle Ling's memorial while her mother-in-law held her wrist steady, making sure every drop went down. My mom counts Dad's gray hairs like she's calculating how many years she has left. When I was 15, Dad had a heart attack and survived. That's when Mom started waking me at 3 a.m. to teach me how to forge signatures and which states are easiest to disappear in. In our family, when a husband dies, the widow has exactly 40 days to follow him into the afterlife. They called it the Eternal Service Pact because apparently men needed servants even after death. I was 7 when I watched my Aunt Ling drink the ceremonial poison at Uncle Ling's 40th day memorial. Her hands shook as she raised the cup, but her mother-in-law held her wrist steady, making sure every drop went down. Aunt May was 23. She tried to run on day 38 and made it all the way to the bus station before Uncle Ling's brothers dragged her back. I remember her begging, saying she was pregnant. They said the baby could serve Uncle Ling, too. My mom would brush my hair every night and tell me how romantic it was that wives loved their husbands so much they couldn't live without them. But I saw the way her hands trembled whenever Dad got a cold. I saw her counting his gray hairs like she was calculating how many years she had left. Sometimes I'd catch her staring at the kitchen knives. Not in a scary way, but like she was measuring which one would be sharpest in 20 years. The thing about this tradition was it wasn't even that old. My great-grandfather started it after his brother's widow remarried someone younger and prettier. He said it was about loyalty, but everyone knew it was about control. Dead women can't inherit property. Dead women can't remarry. Dead women can't testify about what their husbands did to them. Dead women can't tell anyone about the bruises hidden under their funeral clothes. The ceremonies were always the same. Day 40 would arrive and the whole family would gather. The widow would wear white, her husband's favorite dress. She'd serve tea to his relatives one last time. Then they'd bring out the cup, always porcelain, always with painted flowers. The poison smelled like almonds. They'd make her drink it in front of everyone, then lay her next to her husband's photo until she stopped breathing. Usually, it took about 20 minutes. The younger kids were supposed to watch to learn about duty. When I was 15, Dad had a heart attack that he survived, but it changed everything. Mom started acting differently. She'd wake me up at 3 a.m. for lessons. First, she taught me how to forge signatures, making me practice Dad's name until I could do it perfectly. Then came the banking stuff. How to transfer money without triggering alerts, how to hide assets in different names. She showed me websites for fake IDs, taught me which states were easiest to disappear in, and made me memorize bus routes to the Mexican border. Just in case you ever need to disappear, she'd say. But we both knew who really needed to disappear. Then she showed me the videos she'd been collecting for years. Grainy footage of widow ceremonies from old family, gatherings hidden on an encrypted hard drive labeled recipe collection. She'd pause at certain moments. Look at Aunt Ling's cup. See how it's different from Aunt May's? She'd say. Look at Aunt Lou's funeral. Notice how the coffin is so light when they carry it. Look at how her sister keeps checking her phone during the burial. That's when I learned about the secret network. For 20 years, widows had been faking their deaths. Some used special substances that slowed their heartbeat to nothing for 48 hours. One aunt was a nurse who'd been stealing them from the hospital for years. Others had doctor friends who falsified death certificates for cash. There was a whole underground railroad of safe houses in other states where dead women started new lives. They had new names, new social security numbers, and knew everything. Mom taught me the code words at family gatherings. Peaceful passing meant the widow escaped successfully. Fought till the end meant someone was suspicious. Beautiful. Ceremony meant they needed help with documents. Perfect flowers meant they needed money. She's with him now meant she didn't make it out. I started helping when I was 17, creating fake IDs in my high school's computer, lab using the yearbook equipment. Mrs. Garcia thought I was just really dedicated to graphic design. I made 12 new identities that year. Each one had a full backstory, where they went to school, their first job, their favorite coffee order. I got good at aging photos, making young women look older, changing hair colors, and adjusting facial features just enough. We saved cousin Linda when her husband died of liver disease. She died of grief but actually took a bus to Portland with $50,000 in cash and a new name. We saved Uncle Tony's wife by switching her poison cup with one full of sleeping pills. She woke up in Nevada. Not everyone made it. Aunt Patricia's mother-in-law caught her packing. They made her drink 2 cups. Everything went to hell when Uncle Jimmy died. His wife Anna was only 19 and she was pregnant. Uncle Jimmy had been 67, his 4th wife. The previous 3 had followed him into the afterlife within their 40 days. The family started the countdown immediately. They moved Anna into grandmother's house so she couldn't run. They took her phone, her cards, her shoes. But Anna was different. She didn't want to run. She wanted to fight. She showed up at our door 3 days after Uncle Jimmy's funeral, somehow slipping past the aunts who were supposed to be watching her. Her face was swollen from crying, but her eyes burned with something I'd never seen in any of the other widows. She grabbed my mother's hands and squeezed them until her knuckles went white. Mom pulled her inside quickly, checking the street before closing the door. The living room curtains were already drawn. Anna's whole body shook as she stood in our hallway barefoot because they'd taken her shoes to stop her from running. Her feet were bleeding from the mile-long walk across town. I brought her water while Mom checked her over. Anna had bruises on her wrist where someone had held her down. There were red marks on her throat. She kept touching her stomach, a protective gesture that made my chest tighten. Mom made her sit down and started asking questions in a low, urgent voice. How many people are watching the house? Who has the keys? When do they plan to start? The ceremony preparations? Anna answered everything while I bandaged her feet, wincing as I cleaned the cuts. The answers weren't good. Grandmother had assigned shifts, 2 aunts during the day, 2 uncles at night. They'd already bought the ceremonial cup, the one with blue flowers that had been used for Uncle Jimmy's first 3 wives. Day 40 was marked on the kitchen calendar in red ink. They were making Anna help plan her own funeral. Picking out white dresses and discussing flower arrangements. Mom's face went very still as she listened. She excused herself and returned with the encrypted phone we used for network business. Her fingers flew across the screen sending coded messages. Within minutes, responses started coming in. I recognized some of the code words. Garden needs. Tending meant they needed a safe house. Recipe exchange tomorrow meant documents were ready. Bringing dessert meant someone would provide transportation. But then Anna said something that changed everything. She didn't want to run. She didn't want a new identity in another state. She wanted to stay and fight the tradition from the inside. She wanted to save other women after her. Mom tried to explain how dangerous that was. The network operated in shadows for a reason. Open defiance meant real death, not the fake kind we arranged. But Anna's jaw was set in a way that reminded me of Mom's expression during those 3 a.m. lessons. We spent the next 2 hours planning. Anna would go back before they noticed she was missing. She'd play along, act resigned to her fate. Meanwhile, we'd work on a different kind of escape plan. Not running, but surviving in plain sight. I gave Anna one of our burner phones, showing her how to hide it in the lining of her purse. Mom wrote down safe words and meeting signals. We'd communicate through the other widows in the family, those who came to comfort her but were really checking if she needed help. Anna left through the back door as the sun was setting. I watched her limp down the alley, her bandaged feet careful on the gravel. Mom was already on the phone, activating parts of the network we'd never used before. The next few days were tense. At family gatherings, we had to pretend everything was normal. I served tea to grandmother while she talked about the ceremony preparations. She seemed pleased that Anna was being so cooperative, helping choose flowers and writing letters to leave behind. What grandmother didn't know was that every night Anna was meeting with different network members. Aunt Lou's dead sister had sent detailed instructions on which substances mimicked death most convincingly. A cousin who worked at the courthouse was preparing duplicate death certificates. Mrs. Haney from the next town over, whose husband had died 15 years ago, sent money through a complex series of transfers. I spent my evenings in the computer lab creating not just one identity for Anna, but 3. Each had different backstories and destinations. We were preparing for contingencies. Mom made me memorize bus schedules to cities I'd never heard of. Day 15 arrived faster than expected. Anna looked thinner when I saw her at Uncle Tony's birthday dinner. The aunts kept her cup filled with tea, watching every sip. She played her part perfectly, speaking in a soft voice about joining Uncle Jimmy soon. Grandmother patted her hand approvingly. Under the table, Anna pressed a folded paper into my palm. Later in the bathroom, I read her message. They'd moved up the timeline. Someone had seen her near our house. They were suspicious. The ceremony would happen on day 35 instead of day 40. We had 20 days instead of 25. Mom's network went into overdrive. Messages flew back and forth. I was really curious about this whole network that's been running for 20 years. How did nobody notice all these dead women were actually alive somewhere else? The 3 a.m. lessons in forgery seemed like such a specific detail, and I wondered what made Mom start collecting those ceremony videos. Safe houses were prepared. Documents were rushed. But we hit a problem. The substances we needed required a prescription, and our usual doctor contact had just been arrested for something unrelated. We needed a new plan. That's when Anna surprised us again. She'd been watching, learning. She knew which ant prepared the poison, where it was kept, how it was made. She had a different idea. Instead of faking her death with substances, why not switch the poisons, make it look like she drank the real thing when it was something harmless? It was riskier than our usual methods. It required inside help, someone who could access the poison storage. Mom was against it, but Anna had already started recruiting. She'd found an ally in an unexpected place, Uncle Jimmy's mother. The old woman was nearly 90, had outlived 4 sons, and watched 12 daughters-in-law die. Anna had been speaking with her during the long days of confinement, and something had shifted. Maybe it was Anna's pregnancy, the great-grandchild who would die with her. Maybe the old woman was simply tired of watching young women disappear. On day 20, Grandmother announced that Anna would help prepare the ceremonial poison herself to show her acceptance. It was a test. They'd watch her every move, make sure she didn't try to substitute or dilute it, but it also gave us an opportunity. The preparation ceremony took place in Grandmother's kitchen on day 21. I watched from the doorway as Anna stood at the counter, her movements careful and deliberate. Grandmother supervised every step, her sharp eyes tracking each ingredient Anna measured. The other ants formed a semicircle around them, their presence suffocating in the small space. Anna's hands remained steady as she ground the bitter almonds in the mortar. The sound filled the kitchen, rhythmic and final. She added each component exactly as instructed, following the recipe that had unalived Uncle Jimmy's previous wives. Grandmother nodded approvingly at Anna's precision. What the watching ants didn't notice was Uncle Jimmy's mother sitting quietly in the corner, her weathered hands folded in her lap. She appeared to be dozing, but I saw her eyes tracking Anna's movements, saw the slight tension in her shoulders. She was waiting. The poison preparation took 3 hours. Anna bottled the mixture in a small glass vial, sealed it with wax, and handed it to Grandmother for inspection. Grandmother held it up to the light, checking the color and consistency. She seemed satisfied. The vial went into the locked cabinet where all the ceremonial items were stored. That evening, Mom received a coded message through our network. Uncle G. Jimmy's mother had successfully made a duplicate key to the cabinet during her years living in the house. She would make the switch on day 34, the night before the ceremony. We had 13 days to create a harmless substitute that looked identical to the real poison. I spent the next week in my high school chemistry lab after hours. My teacher had given me a key for my advanced placement projects, never suspecting I was creating fake poison. The real mixture had a distinctive amber color and bitter almond scent. I experimented with different combinations of harmless ingredients, trying to match both appearance and smell. Mom coordinated with other network members who had chemistry knowledge. A widow in another state, now working as a lab technician under a false identity, sent detailed instructions through encrypted emails. She'd helped 3 other women fake their deaths using similar methods. On day 25, everything started falling apart. Anna sent an emergency signal during a family dinner. I was serving dessert when I noticed her tapping her water glass in the danger pattern we'd established. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, immediate threat. After dinner, I found her message. Hidden in the bathroom. Someone had seen Uncle Jimmy's mother near the cabinet at night. They were suspicious. Grandmother announced that the cabinet would now have 2 guards, and the key would stay on her person at all times. Mom called an emergency network meeting that night. We gathered in Mrs. Haney's basement, 8 women who were supposed to be dead sitting around a folding table. Each had successfully escaped the tradition, but they all remembered the terror of their own countdowns. The discussion grew heated. Some wanted to abort the plan, get Anna out immediately through our usual channels. Others argued we were too far along, that backing out now would expose the entire network. Mom kept trying to find middle ground, but I could see the strain on her face. Then Mrs. Haney spoke up. She'd been quiet until that moment, but her words changed everything. She revealed that she'd been documenting every ceremony for the past 15 years. Hidden cameras, audio recordings, detailed notes. She had evidence of over 40 forced deaths, including video of women being physically restrained while the poison was administered. The room went silent. We'd all known the truth, but seeing the evidence laid out was different. Mrs. Haney explained, she'd been waiting for the right moment, the right case to expose everything. Anna's situation, with her pregnancy and Uncle Jimmy's mother as an inside ally, might be that moment. But exposure meant risk. Real risk, not just the fake kind we arranged. Not just for Anna, but for every woman in the network. Some had children in their new lives, careers, marriages. They'd built entire existences on the foundation of being dead. Exposure would destroy it all. The meeting ended without consensus. Mom and I drove home in silence, both lost in our own thoughts. We had 10 days left and our original plan was compromised. On day 28, Grandmother made another announcement. The ceremony would be public and held at the family temple, instead of the house. The entire extended family, over 200 people, would attend. She wanted to make an example of Anna's devotion to inspire other young wives. This complicated everything. Our escape plans had relied on the chaos of a house ceremony, the ability to switch bodies in a crowded room. A temple ceremony would have formal procedures, assigned seating, multiple witnesses. There would be nowhere to hide. Anna's response was unexpected. She embraced the change, telling Grandmother she was honored by the public ceremony. She volunteered to help with preparations, to send invitations, to coordinate with the temple. Grandmother was pleased by her enthusiasm. What Grandmother didn't know was that Anna was building her own network within the family. She'd identified the doubters, those who attended ceremonies with reluctance. Uncle Jimmy's mother helped by pointing out which relatives had questioned the tradition privately over the years. I watched Anna work during family gatherings. She was subtle, planting seeds of doubt without seeming to. She'd mention her pregnancy symptoms to the younger. Aunts let them feel the baby kick. She'd share memories of Uncle Jimmy with his brothers, reminding them of his cruelty. She never spoke against the tradition directly, but her words had weight. On day 30, we had a breakthrough. One of Uncle Jimmy's nephews approached Mom at the market. He'd been assigned as one of the night guards but wanted to help. His own wife was pregnant, and watching Anna's countdown had changed something in him. He offered to be on duty the night before the ceremony. Mom was suspicious at first. We'd learned to be careful about unexpected allies. But the nephew proved his sincerity by revealing that 3 other young men in the family felt the same way. They'd been talking privately, questioning why their wives should die for them someday. This changed our options. With inside help among the guards, we could attempt the poison switch after all. But we needed a new plan for the temple ceremony itself. Even with fake poison, Anna would need medical attention afterward to complete the deception. The temple was isolated, far from any hospital. I spent day 31 creating Anna's final identity documents. This time I made her older, a widow who'd lost her husband. The backstory was detailed: where she'd lived, what her husband did for work, how long they'd been married. I aged her photos, adding lines around her eyes and gray streaks in her hair. Mom coordinated with a network doctor 3 states away. She would declare Anna dead over a video call using footage we'd prepare in advance. The death certificate was already printed, waiting for the official time of death to be added. Everything was ready for Anna's new life. But Anna was still focused on something bigger. She'd been recording conversations with family members on the burner phone, gathering evidence of coercion. She wanted what Mrs. Haney had offered: exposure of the tradition. Not just escape, but justice for all the women who hadn't made it out. On day 32, Grandmother tightened security further. Anna was no longer allowed to leave her room except for meals and ceremony preparations. 2 aunts slept in her room at night. The windows were nailed shut. They even removed the bathroom door to prevent privacy. Anna adapted. She used mealtimes to continue her subtle campaign among the family. She spoke about the baby constantly, wondering aloud whether it would be a boy or a girl, what Uncle Jimmy would have wanted to name it. Several aunts began crying during these conversations, though they tried to hide it. Uncle Jimmy's mother played her part perfectly. She grumbled about the public ceremony, complained about the travel to the temple, and acted every bit the traditional matriarch. No one suspected she'd already made 3 copies of the cabinet key, or that she visited Anna's room each night to check on her when the guards dozed. On day 33, the family held a rehearsal at the temple. Anna walked through each step of the ceremony, practicing her final tea service and her last words to Uncle Jimmy's spirit. She was serene, almost glowing. The nephew switching sides because his wife was pregnant hits different when you realize he's basically looking at his own future grief and going, "Wait a minute, this math doesn't add up." Grandmother praised her composure repeatedly. I attended the rehearsal as part of the family chorus. We were supposed to chant traditional songs during the ceremony, creating a wall of sound that would mask any final protests. But as I watched Anna practiced drinking from an empty cup, I noticed something. Several of the younger relatives weren't singing. They were mouthing the words, but no sound came out. That evening, the nephew who'd offered to help confirmed what I'd suspected. The quiet rebellion was growing. At least a dozen family members were planning to refuse participation in the ceremony. They wouldn't stop it, but they wouldn't help either. It was a small crack in the tradition's foundation. Mom spent that night finalizing escape routes. The temple had 3 exits. The main entrance, a side door near the preparation room, and an old service entrance that was supposedly locked. Our network had scouted each one, timing distances to various safe houses. We had drivers positioned at strategic points, ready to move when signaled. Day 34 arrived with unusual heat. The family buzzed with ceremony preparations. Flowers arrived at the temple, white chrysanthemums for grief and red roses for love. The ceremonial cup was cleaned and polished, its blue flowers bright against the porcelain. Grandmother, personally, supervised every detail. Anna spent the morning writing letters. Tradition required her to leave messages for family members, final words of wisdom and love. But Anna wrote other letters, hidden between the traditional ones. Letters to the daughters who would be born into the family, warning them about the tradition, telling them about the network, giving them hope. That afternoon, Uncle Jimmy's mother made her move. During the chaos of preparation, she volunteered to check the ceremonial items one final time. Grandmother, distracted by a problem with the flower arrangements, handed over the key without thinking. It was a moment 2 weeks in the making. The switch took less than 30 seconds. Uncle Jimmy's mother had practiced the movement dozens of times. Out came the real poison, and in went our substitute. They were identical, down to the wax seal I'd carefully reproduced. She locked the cabinet and returned the key before anyone noticed her absence. But we'd underestimated grandmother's paranoia. That evening, she announced a final test. Anna would drink a small sip of the poison during sunset prayers to prove her commitment. Not enough to unalive her, just enough to show willingness. The actual ceremony would still happen the next day, but this test would silence any doubters. The family gathered in the temple as the sun set. Anna knelt before Uncle Jimmy's portrait, the cup in her hands. I stood with the chorus, my heart hammering. We hadn't planned for this. A sip of real poison would be enough to make her violently ill, possibly enough to harm the baby. Anna raised the cup to her lips. The temple fell silent. Even the children seemed to hold their breath. But just as the liquid touched her lips, Uncle Jimmy's mother collapsed. The old woman fell hard, clutching her chest. Someone screamed. The cup slipped from Anna's hands, shattering on the stone floor. The poison spread across the tiles, a dark stain that seemed to grow in the dying light. Chaos erupted. Family members rushed to help Uncle Jimmy's mother. Someone called for a doctor. Grandmother shouted for order, but no one listened. Anna was pushed aside in the confusion, forgotten momentarily as everyone focused on the medical emergency. Mom and I exchanged glances across the room. This wasn't part of our plan, but Uncle Jimmy's mother, even as relatives fanned her face and checked her pulse, managed to catch my eye. The slightest wink told me everything. She'd created the perfect distraction. The paramedics arrived, within minutes. Uncle Jimmy's mother was loaded onto a stretcher with an oxygen mask over her face. She gestured weakly for Anna to come close. Everyone leaned in to hear her final words to her daughter-in-law, but the old woman was a better actor than any of us had guessed. She gripped Anna's hand and pulled her down, whispering something that made Anna's eyes go wide. Then, she was wheeled away, several family members following the ambulance to the hospital. Grandmother stood among the broken porcelain and spilled poison, her face a mask of fury. The ceremony was ruined. The poison was gone. The sun had set, making it inauspicious to prepare more until morning. She ordered everyone to return home and gather again at dawn for the delayed ceremony. As we filed out of the temple, I noticed something crucial. In the chaos, Anna had disappeared. Her assigned guards were busy cleaning up the poison, arguing about who was responsible for the disaster. No one had seen her slip out the service entrance, the one our network had quietly unlocked that morning. Mom and I drove home in tense silence, both of us checking our phones constantly. No word from Anna, no signals from the network. The answer came at midnight, a coded message through 3 different network channels. Anna was safe, but she hadn't run. She was hiding in the temple itself, in a storage room behind the altar that Uncle Jimmy's mother had told her about decades ago. Anna's message was clear. She would not run. Tomorrow, she would appear at the ceremony as expected. She would drink from the cup in front of everyone, but this time the entire family would know the truth about what they were witnessing. Mom tried to talk her out of it. The substitute poison would make her sick, and it might still harm the baby. The fake death substances were safer, tested. But Anna had made her choice. She wanted the family to see her die and then rise again. She wanted them to know that every ceremony they'd witnessed might have been a lie. We had less than 6 hours until dawn. The network mobilized for one final push. Mrs. Haney prepared her evidence for release. The widows who'd escaped years ago made videos revealing their survival. Uncle Jimmy's mother, from her hospital bed, recorded her own testimony about the wives she'd helped unalive. I spent those hours in the computer lab, uploading everything to secure servers. We created an automated system. If Anna didn't input a code every 12 hours, all the evidence would be sent to every family member's email, phone, and social media. The tradition would be exposed whether grandmother wanted it or not. As dawn approached, I thought about all the women who hadn't made it out. Aunt Ling with her shaking hands, Aunt May who tried to run, Aunt Patricia's mother-in-law who caught her packing. Tomorrow, Anna would drink for all of them, and one way or another, the tradition would never be the same. The sun rose on day 35, painting the sky the color of blood and gold. The family gathered once more at the temple, subdued after yesterday's chaos. Grandmother had spent the night preparing new poison, testing it herself to ensure its potency. The ceremonial cup had been replaced, this one painted with yellow lilies. Anna arrived in a white dress, her hair pinned up with jade combs that had belonged to Uncle Jimmy's first wife. She looked pale but determined, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. The guards flanked her closely, having been scolded thoroughly for losing her. The night before, the ceremony began with the traditional chant. This time, even fewer voices joined in. Most of the family watched in horrified silence as Anna's breathing grew labored. I was the chief surgeon who separated conjoined twins at this hospital. But when I came to the ER with appendicitis, Nurse Brenda ripped off my hijab and made me walk laps to prove I wasn't faking. After my appendix ruptured and they found out who I was, I discovered Brenda had friends in IT deleting security footage and HR destroying complaints. Now someone's been breaking into my apartment and slashing my tires with notes, warning me to stop investigating. After developing severe abdominal pain, I ended up in the ER of the exact hospital where I'd performed my infamous conjoined twin separation. I walked in doubled over, my hijab damp with sweat, vomit stains on my sleeves from the taxi ride. Nurse Brenda looked up from her computer. Her fingers stopped mid-word. Her eyes traveled from my hijab to my face to the way I clutched my right side. She pointed to the far corner of the waiting room without saying anything. Each step sent lightning bolts through my abdomen. 10 minutes. Later, an elderly white couple walked in and sat in the middle section. The nurse immediately called them forward for triage. I watched 3 more patients arrive after me and get seen first. Each time, her eyes swept past me as though I were part of the furniture. The pain was getting sharper, like someone was twisting a knife in my gut. When she finally looked in my direction, she didn't even glance at my paperwork. "The religious woman with a headscarf in the back," she called out dismissively. The entire waiting room turned to watch me struggle to stand. My legs shook. I had to grip the armrest to pull myself up. She announced, loudly enough for everyone to hear, that they had special protocols for patients like me. During the assessment, she made me stand, even though I could barely stay upright. The room started spinning. I had to lock my knees to keep from collapsing. She acted like I was being dramatic. "Your culture always exaggerates women's normal monthly pain," she said, while barely glancing at my vitals. My temperature was 102 degrees, but she wrote down 95 degrees. I could feel my appendix throbbing with each heartbeat. I tried explaining that I was having severe right lower quadrant pain with rebound tenderness. Classic appendicitis symptoms. She cut me off. "You probably don't even understand what appendicitis is." Then she announced to her colleague that my type had different pain tolerances, so it was hard to assess accurately. When I asked to use the bathroom because I felt like I was going to vomit again, she said facilities were for processed patients only. And I'd been there 2 hours already. My mouth tasted like metal, my stomach churned violently. She sent me back to the corner to wait. The walk back felt like miles, and I had to stop twice to breathe through the stabbing sensation. Another hour passed before she called me up again. This time, she demanded to see identification. When I reached for my wallet, she suddenly grabbed my hijab and yanked it off my head. "Proper ID verification requires full facial visibility," she declared, holding my hijab as though it were contaminated. My hair tumbled down my shoulders. I felt more exposed than ever in public. She made me turn in a full circle while other patients watched. Some looked uncomfortable, but nobody said anything. The pain was worse. When I tried to explain this, she pressed brutally on my abdomen right where it hurt most. I screamed and doubled over. My knees hit the floor hard, but I barely felt it compared to the explosion in my gut. Imagine being the renowned surgeon who separated conjoined twins, only to have your own hospital betray you when you needed help most. Stripping off your hijab and ignoring your screams until your appendix ruptured. Humiliated and left for dead, Dr. Amamira Hassan refused to stay silent and uncovered a network of discrimination and corruption that endangered every patient. This is the story of how one woman transformed her pain into purpose and forced a broken system to change. She wrote something on her chart and said I needed to walk laps around the waiting room to prove I wasn't faking for pain medication. I managed 3 steps before the room tilted sideways. My stomach convulsed and I vomited bile onto the floor. The movement sent such intense pain through my side that tears streamed down my face. She stepped back, disgusted, and called for janitorial. Then she said if I couldn't control myself, I'd have to wait outside. I begged for the bathroom just to clean up. She said no. I asked for anti-nausea medication. She said no. I told her I was a doctor and I knew my appendix was about to rupture. Each word took enormous effort. That's when she screamed that I was making terrorist threats by claiming to be a doctor. Security grabbed both my arms and started dragging me toward the exit. "Go back where you came from for treatment," she spat as they hauled me outside. They threw me onto the pavement, just as my legs gave out completely. The impact sent brutal pain through my abdomen. Everything went black for a second. As I collapsed from pain, my old hospital ID tumbled from my bag. Chief of Pediatric Surgery, 2015 to 2020. The intake nurse picked it up, about to toss it aside when she saw the name, Dr. Amamira Hassan. The pen dropped from her hand. "Oh my gosh, you're her, the conjoined twin surgeon?" Another nurse gasped. I was writhing on the floor, appendix about to burst. "Get her to surgery now," someone yelled. 6 hours later, I woke up in recovery. The same nurse who tormented me stood in the doorway with the administrator. Her face had lost all color. The administrator asked if I wanted her terminated immediately. I looked at her a long moment. "No," I said finally. Not because I wasn't upset, I absolutely was, but because at that moment, I realized something. Crucial. Nurse Brenda had no idea what was coming. 2 days later, I walked back into the hospital via the main entrance. My surgical site still throbbed, but I kept my posture straight. The security guard who'd thrown me out recognized me immediately. His eyes widened. He stepped aside without a word. I made my way to Dr. Theodore Blackwood's office on the fourth floor. His secretary stood as I entered. Dr. Blackwood rose from behind his mahogany desk, tall, silver-haired, wire-rimmed glasses. We had worked together for years. I showed him photos I'd taken in recovery, my medical chart, the falsified temperature reading, the documented hysteria diagnosis Brenda wrote before my appendix ruptured. His jaw tightened as he scrolled through the evidence. He rubbed his temples, the liability, the publicity, the damage to the hospital's reputation running through his mind. He opened his mouth, but I held up my hand. I pulled out a folder, printed emails from staff members who'd witnessed the incident. 3 nurses, 2 orderlies, even a patient in the waiting room. They described Brenda's humiliation, denial of basic care, ordering security to remove me while I was clearly in distress. Dr. Blackwood read each statement slowly. His face grew graver. He picked up the phone to request Brenda's personnel file. It showed 3 previous complaints, all from patients who wore hijabs or other religious coverings, all dismissed as misunderstandings or cultural differences, all signed off by the same supervisor. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern, and the hospital had enabled it by looking the other way. Dr. Blackwood placed Brenda on administrative leave pending a full investigation. I shook my head. That wasn't enough. Not after what she'd done, not after what she'd been allowed to do to others. I told him I wanted to join the investigation. Access to all previous complaints, interviews with mistreated patients, full transparency. He tried to object, but I reminded him of my 5 years of service, the prestige I'd brought, the residents I'd trained. In my moment of need, his staff nearly unlived me because of the color of my skin and my head covering. The next morning, I arrived at 7. Brenda's shift started at 8. I stood in the lobby, watching the employee entrance. At 7:45, she walked in, coffee in hand, chatting with a colleague, and froze when she saw me. Her cup crashed to the floor, brown liquid splashing across the white tiles. I didn't move. Security approached her with a letter. Administrative leave. Effective immediately. She looked at me one last time, her face a mask of shock, before they escorted her away. Over the next week, I threw myself into the investigation, interviewed the 3 previous complainants, each with a heartbreakingly similar story. Delayed care, humiliation, dismissive treatment. Brenda wasn't going down without a fight. She hired a lawyer and filed a union grievance, claiming she was scapegoated for following protocols, accusing me of personal vengeance. Then, the threats began. Anonymous notes in my hospital mailbox. My car tires slashed in the garage. Camera. Angles conveniently obscured. Timestamps corrupted. Someone was protecting Brenda, and they were good at it. I met with Dr. Blackwood again. This time, the hospital's legal counsel, Victoria Jones, joined us. They offered me a quiet settlement, enough money to cover bills and lost wages in exchange for an NDA and dropping the investigation. I tore the paper in half. Witnesses became reluctant, documents went missing. The supervisor who dismissed complaints took early retirement. Brenda returned after her union's injunction, assigned to a different department, but I saw her smirk in the hallways. She knew she was winning. One afternoon, Dr. Theo Martinez, a resident on duty that night, slid a USB drive across the table. It contained the real security footage, Brenda pulling off my hijab, pressing on my abdomen as I screamed, ordering security to throw me out. More audio of her prejudiced comments, emails bragging about delaying those people. I copied everything, to Dr. Blackwood, the board, my lawyer, because now this was about every patient Brenda had hurt. 3 days until the board meeting. I prepared meticulously, but that morning my USB drives were blank, their files wiped. Dr. Martinez disappeared, transferred across the state with no notice. Panic rose in my throat as I stared at the blank screen. Then my phone buzzed. Heavy breathing, a whisper warning me to leave the hospital immediately if I knew what was good for me. The board members arrived. Without evidence, I had nothing but my word. They rescheduled the meeting. Outside, Brenda brushed past me in the hallway, her smirk deliberate. Over the next week, I pieced together new evidence with Dr. Kim, who risked her own career to send me screenshots, emails, messages, between Brenda and her network. I backed everything up in hidden locations. My car windshield was smashed. Police were skeptical. A photo of my sister's house arrived by text. Nice family, be a shame if they needed emergency medical care. My sister was fine, but terrified. Dr. Blackwood called me to his home at sunset. He'd uncovered financial irregularities, manipulated overtime records, destroyed documents, false timestamps. Brenda's network had stolen thousands. He warned me taking this to the board would be dangerous. They'd already received warnings. We spent hours organizing a case that exposed discrimination and corruption. That night, someone rammed my car on the street. I gave a statement. Without a plate or witnesses, there was little police could do. I retreated to a hotel under a fake name, then escaped through the bathroom window when security barged in without cause. I drove to Dr. Martinez's rural farm. His decades of experience helped refine the case. His wife, a former nurse, detailed how Brenda's network twisted hospital protocols. 3 days later, external auditors arrived. The hospital accounting system had flagged over $40,000 in fraud. I presented incident reports, witness statements, screenshots of racist messages, financial records, corrupt personnel files. The board voted to expand the investigation. Brenda's IT cousin, HR friend, and security boyfriend were all suspended pending outcome. Law enforcement was notified. Brenda confronted me in the hallway, hissing threats. "You'll regret destroying my life." Her lawyer dragged her away. The months that followed were a blur of union grievances, media coverage, protests in her support, and more evidence uncovered by forensic auditors. The hospital faced civil lawsuits, most settled. The pressure grew. Her security boyfriend was reinstated, then later exposed for blackmailing colleagues. Depositions brought new victims forward. An elderly Sikh man denied pain meds. A young woman in a niqab turned away with severe symptoms. Finally, prosecutors built a federal case for fraud. I testified. Brenda's defense crumbled under emails, financial records, and her own network's testimonies. The jury found her guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Her associates faced probation or shorter terms. The hospital paid millions in settlements. Board members resigned, and Dr. Blackwood was promoted to CEO to spearhead reforms. He offered me a dual role: return to surgery and oversee diversity and inclusion. I accepted with conditions: authority to investigate complaints, a budget for training, and public acknowledgement of past failures. We implemented anonymous reporting, mandatory cultural sensitivity sessions, and patient advocacy programs. Over time, staff and patient satisfaction improved. Other hospitals adopted our model. Brenda was released early but barred from healthcare. I sometimes wondered if she'd felt remorse, but it no longer mattered. The system that enabled her was dismantled. My own scars healed. Physical ones quickly, emotional ones more slowly. But they gave me purpose. Now, new employees learn my story in orientation, how discrimination nearly cost a patient her life, and why we must treat everyone with equal dignity. Every day, I fight for equity. Every policy change, every training session, every protected patient validates the struggle. The hospital where I nearly died became the place where I found my calling. Not just as a surgeon, but as an advocate, ensuring everyone who walks through those doors receives the care they deserve. I timed my panic attacks with a stopwatch to see which parking lots made the most money. When I finally asked him why they let me starve, unless I performed, he smirked and said, "Because that's when you're most convincing." I just stared at him. That was 12 years ago. Last night, he left a voicemail, crying so hard I couldn't understand a single word. I was 6 when my parents discovered I could cry on command. Not fake tears, real heartbreaking sobs that made strangers reach for their wallets. They'd been living off expired food bank donations and whatever change they found in couch cushions. Too lazy to work, but creative enough to see opportunity in their daughter's tears. It started with an accident. Mom had dragged me to the grocery store, and when she couldn't afford milk, I began to cry from genuine hunger. A stranger handed her $40. I watched my mother's face change, like she'd discovered buried treasure. That night, she practiced pinching my arm until I cried on cue, again and again, cigarette dangling from her lips. By 7, I didn't need the pinch anymore. I knew my cue. When Mom cleared her throat twice, the tears would fall. They trained me like a circus animal, except my trick was genuine despair I could summon at will. Dad would tie me to his phone. 30 seconds to full sob, he'd announce proudly. "That's my girl." The rules were simple but absolute. Never use the same store twice in a month. Always wear the same stained pink dress. My work uniform that Mom carefully maintained to look pitiful, but not suspicious. Look strangers in the eye when crying, but never speak unless asked a direct question. Never tell anyone what we were doing. "You want to eat tonight, don't you?" Dad would say, counting bills on our mattress on the floor. This is your job. Every family member contributes. They mapped out territories like generals planning a campaign, grocery stores on Mondays, doctor office parking lots on Tuesdays, people already emotional from bad news or sick children, the unemployment office on Fridays. Dad pretended to fix something under the hood while Mom worked me like a wind-up toy. I learned the science of manipulation. Let the first tear roll slowly, hiccup twice before the sob, make my hands shake just enough to seem vulnerable, but not sick. Some days I made $300 before lunch. My parents celebrated with gas station wine while I sat in the corner practicing my expressions in a cracked mirror. They called me their little gold mine. But the worst part wasn't performing. It was how good I got at reading people. The woman with the designer purse, who always gave guilt money, approached her near her car, never inside the store. The grandfather who saw his own grandchild in my tears, mentioned being hungry but never asked directly. My parents kept detailed notebooks. Tuesday's suburban Target, 127 seconds. Thursday's Medical Plaza, 245 seconds. They experimented with props, but nothing worked better than my tears alone. Pure talent, Mom would say, ruffling my unwashed hair. School became an afterthought. I missed so many days that teachers stopped asking. When I attended, I'd fall asleep at my desk, exhausted from morning shifts. Other kids talked about weekends, at the park or movies. I counted money in my head, calculating which parking lots we hadn't hit this month. By 9, our reputation preceded us. Store security recognized us. Good Samaritans offered to buy groceries instead of giving cash. Mom pretended to shop while I stood there, tears still drying on my cheeks, watching her load items into the cart we'd abandoned in the parking lot. What we needed wasn't food. It was rent money, beer money, scratch-off lottery money. The line between need and greed blurred after a while. The breaking point came at a McDonald's. I was working the lunch crowd, Mom hovering nearby with her practiced look of desperation. A woman knelt and wiped my tears with a napkin that smelled like French fries. "Sweetie, are you okay? Where's your daddy?" Before I could remember my script, she looked closer. "Wait," she said slowly. "Weren't you two at Target? Last week, CVS last month, and Walgreens before that?" Mom's hand clamped on my shoulder. We left so fast I could hear coins jingling in her pocket. But the woman followed us, took a picture of our license plate, posted it online within hours, with a warning about a couple using a crying child to scam people. The comment section exploded. Others recognized us, shared their own encounters. Someone had even taken a video. Within days, we couldn't work anywhere. The grocery store banned us. Local Facebook groups shared our photos with warnings. My parents' laziness had finally caught up with them, but their solution was worse than I imagined. And now, having seen the world closing in, my parents decided I was just too old for crying. "You're getting too old for crying anyway," Mom said that night, studying my face like I was broken equipment. But a girl who can perform on command, make herself whatever someone needs, that's worth something. She made phone calls while I pretended to sleep, negotiating my special skills. I heard her discuss my age, my talents, how convincing I could be in any role. The real show was about to begin. I took the emergency $20 bill hidden in my shoe, money I'd stolen from my own earnings, and ran at dawn. The pavement was cold under my bare feet as I fled into the empty streets. My parents wouldn't wake for hours, not after their celebration drinking last night. I knew their patterns and weaknesses better than they knew mine. I ducked behind a dumpster as a delivery truck rumbled past. The 20 in my shoe felt like freedom mixed with terror. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I found an abandoned shopping cart under a bridge and curled up inside, pulling a piece of cardboard over myself. My body shook, not from cold, but from the memory of Mom's phone calls, the way she lowered her voice when describing prices, how she studied me like broken equipment. Sleep came in fragments. I dreamed of crying on command, but the tears wouldn't stop. They flooded the grocery stores, the parking lots, every place I'd performed. When I woke, real tears stained my cheeks, the kind that came without trying. By noon, hunger drove me from my hiding spot. I knew they'd be looking now. Dad would check the usual places, the park, the library. Mom would think like me, predict where a 9-year-old with $20 might go. So I avoided the main streets, sticking to alleys I'd memorized during our territory drives. My stomach cramped, but I couldn't risk buying food until I was farther away. Every person I passed might recognize me from the photos online. A woman at a bus stop studied me too long. I ducked into a hardware store pretending to browse. The clerk watched me suspiciously. I left quickly, heart pounding. By evening, I'd made it 6 miles from home. My feet bled where concrete had worn through skin. I risked buying a sandwich at a gas station, choosing one where the clerk barely looked up. The food tasted like survival. I slept that night in a playground tube slide, plastic cold against my skin. Every passing car made me curl tighter. They were searching now, desperate. The second day, I saw Dad's car twice, once outside the grocery store where I'd worked, once cruising past bus stops. I pressed myself behind a mailbox, watched him lean out the window, scanning faces. His expression wasn't worried or sad. It was angry, the same look when lottery tickets came up empty. I kept moving, but exhaustion made me sloppy. In a public restroom, I tried to clean the blood from my feet. A mother with 2 kids entered, took one look, and pulled out her phone. I ran before she could dial, leaving bloody footprints on the tile. The 20 dwindled. Bus fare to get farther. Away, Band-Aids for my feet, a bottle of water, each purchase calculated like Mom taught me. What brings the most return for the least investment? On the 3rd night, I made a mistake. The laundromat was warm. The owner had stepped out. I curled up behind a row of dryers just to get warm. I woke to familiar voices. Mom at the counter, showing her phone with my photo. I couldn't hear the words, but I recognized her performance. The concerned mother, the desperate parent. I crawled between machines, eyes fixed on the emergency exit 20 feet away. Then Dad's shadow fell across the doorway. He leaned in, pretending to smoke, eyes sweeping the room. I reversed direction, heading for the back exit. I pushed the emergency door, and an alarm shrieked. I bolted into the alley as their shouts erupted. Dad's footsteps pounded closer. Mom called my name with fake sweetness. A fence blocked the alley's end, too high to climb with bleeding feet. I turned to face them, trapped like the child I was. They approached slowly, knowing I had nowhere to go. Mom knelt in the dirty alley, arms open, her sympathetic mask for social workers. Dad hung back, phone in hand, still timing everything, still measuring my value in seconds and dollars. That's when I did the only thing I knew. I cried. Not the practiced tears of performance, but real sobs that shook my whole body. A woman emerged from the laundromat's back door, drawn by the alarm. She saw a dirty, bleeding child cornered by 2 adults in an alley. Mom's mask slipped for a second, long enough for the woman to see the truth. Dad backed away, hands visible, trying to look non-threatening. But they taught me too well. I read people. This woman reached for her phone, not to offer a handout, but to call for help. My tears this time were real, and that made the difference. She sat beside me in the alley and waited, while my parents' car circled the block, while the alarm finally stopped, while I decided what character to play next. She introduced herself as Victoria, pulling tissues from her purse. She cleaned and bandaged my feet, examined each cut with steady, professional hands. My parents' car passed again, slower this time. I pressed against the wall. Victoria positioned herself between me and the street. She suggested moving somewhere safer. We walked to her car, a modest sedan with a child's booster seat and real family photos hanging from the mirror. I climbed into the passenger seat, leaving bloody smears on the upholstery. Victoria didn't complain. We drove in silence for several minutes. She parked in front of a drugstore, locked the doors, and went inside. Through the window, I watched her buy bandages, antiseptic, children's socks, wet wipes, 2 sandwiches, and juice bottles. Back in the car, she cleaned my wounds properly. The antiseptic stung, but I didn't flinch. She wrapped each foot carefully, helped me into clean socks with little flowers. I couldn't remember the last time I'd worn new socks. She unwrapped a sandwich and handed it to me. I ate mechanically, tasting nothing. She asked where I lived, if I had somewhere safe to go. I gave vague answers. Trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. Her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, frowned, and answered. I heard her mention she was with a child who needed help. When she hung up, her expression had changed, more alert, more careful. She worked at a community center that helped families in crisis. She explained I could stay up to 3 days without parental contact if I was in immediate danger. After that, protocols would kick in. The community center was a converted house in a strange neighborhood. Victoria parked in the back, away from the street. She led me inside a secured door. The interior smelled like coffee and cleaning supplies. Children's drawings covered one wall. A donation box sat half full of canned goods. Tori, a younger woman with paint-stained jeans and tired eyes, met us. They showed me to a small room with a single bed and a window overlooking the parking lot. Sheets were mismatched but clean. A towel, toothbrush, and toothpaste lay folded on the pillow. Left alone, I checked exits, memorized the layout, stairs at both ends, emergency doors, windows I could reach. I counted 3 ways out if things went wrong. The shower was heaven. Hot water washed away 3 days of dirt, blood, and fear. I watched the pink dress swirl down the drain. Clean clothes waited on the bed. Jeans and a cartoon t-shirt. Too big, but soft. The pink dress lay crumpled in a corner. I kicked it under the bed. Good riddance. Downstairs, Victoria, Tori, and the center's director, an older woman with gray hair, sat at a kitchen table with mugs of coffee. They offered hot chocolate and cookies. I ate them anyway. The director asked if I felt safe talking. I shrugged, offering half-truths. Ran away from home. Parents were difficult. They spoke quietly, planning longer-term solutions. Foster care was too complex. Extended family didn't exist. The 3-day grace period neared its end, and paperwork would create a trail back to my parents. By lunchtime, I decided to leave. After dinner, I crept downstairs while the house was quiet and stole $10 from the donation box, leaving 5, because even desperation had limits. With the backdoor code memorized, I slipped into the night air, the center sleeping peacefully behind me. First stop, the laundromat alley. I retrieved the torn pink dress from under the dumpster, not to wear, but to carry proof of what I'd escaped. I folded it carefully and tucked it inside my jacket. Then I walked to the bus station. $10 would get me partway anywhere. At the station's ticket machine, I fed in crumpled bills and selected the farthest destination I could afford. The machine spat out a ticket for a place I'd never heard of. Perfect. While waiting, I changed my appearance in the restroom. Hair under a baseball cap, jacket inside out. Small changes to buy time when my parents came looking. The bus arrived as dawn broke. I chose a seat in the back and watched the city shrink behind me. Each mile felt like a small victory. As we barreled down the highway, I dozed fitfully, jerking awake at each stop to check for familiar cars. By afternoon, my ticket had run out. The driver announced our stop, a small station surrounded by crowds to blend into. I spotted a woman and her teenage daughter waiting. I explained I'd gotten separated from my group. Could they help me find a connecting bus? They checked schedules on her phone. The daughter shared a granola bar. They invited me along to their next stop, 2 states over. Her brother had a spare ticket. I accepted, feigning reluctance. Their road trip world of snacks and audiobooks washed over me like camouflage. At the next major station, I thanked them, said my aunt would pick me up there, and waved goodbye. They drove off believing they'd helped a child in need, and they had, just not how they imagined. I studied departure boards for all-night routes, then approached an elderly man struggling at a ticket machine. I offered genuine help, guided him step by step, and he pressed $5 into my hand. Not scamming, just kindness repaid. By evening, I'd saved enough for a medium-distance ticket. Not as far as I wanted, but far enough for now. I boarded the overnight bus toward a new horizon, pink dress folded in my jacket like a talisman of who I once was. In the new town, I found a diner at pre-dawn. Neon flickered. The waitress, a regular, refilled my water and slipped me extra. Jam without charging. Small kindnesses from strangers still surprised me. I studied routines. Hardware store sweepers at 7. Dog walkers at 7:15. A school bus at 7:30. By 8, regulars filled the diner. Construction workers, office clerks. I stayed invisible in my corner. I left a tip from my dwindling funds and walked the main street, reading help-wanted signs. The grocery store needed stockers. The motel advertised housekeeping help. But who would hire a malnourished child? The library opened at 9. Grateful for warmth and quiet, I spread the pink dress across a table. Grass stains, burn hole, new tear. I folded it small and brought it to the librarian's desk. She placed it in a lost-and-found bag, labeled with a date, and filed it away in silence. Neither of us spoke, but I felt lighter. On the bulletin board, I found a handwritten ad. Farm. Help needed, room and board included. No experience necessary. I memorized the phone number and called from a payphone. At the feed store 15 miles away, I found the farmer's green Ford. He loaded chicken feed. I mentioned his wife's ad. He studied me, thin, bandaged feet, then nodded and invited me into his truck. The farm was small but well kept. White house, red barn, chickens pecking in the yard. His wife, round and solid, gray hair in a bun, met us and showed me the spare room. Tiny but clean, quilted bed, window overlooking the garden. She explained chores, feeding chickens, collecting eggs, tending the garden. I nodded, eager to work. Lunch was soup and bread at a scarred kitchen table. They asked few questions, talking instead about the upcoming harvest and a new calf. That afternoon, I worked until my muscles ached, weeding, hauling water, stacking firewood. Physical labor left no room for remembering or fear. When evening came, I could barely keep my eyes open through dinner. They paid me in room, board, and a small wage. I fell asleep to crickets and wind through the trees. No sirens, no shouting, no parents scheming next door. Days blended into weeks. I learned farm rhythms, collecting eggs at dawn, tending plants in the afternoon. My hands grew calloused, my arms stronger, and the hollow look faded from my face as regular meals filled me out. Margaret and Frank treated me like the grandchild they never had. They taught me practical skills, vegetable gardening, fence mending, weather reading. Their steady presence asked nothing of me except honest work. One morning, while feeding chickens, I heard a familiar engine at the end of the driveway. My body froze despite the summer heat. Dad always said the Ford needed a new muffler. I dropped the feed bucket, ran for the loft, and pressed myself against the wall. From a crack in the boards, I watched my parents' car creep up. Mom arranged, her face into concern. Dad pulled out phone photos. Margaret listened politely. Frank emerged with a pitchfork, symbolic protection, not threat. Mom's gestures grew animated. Dad advanced with another tactic. Frank simply pointed to the road. Get off our property now. They retreated without a fight. In the barn, I wept tears of relief, real sobs, not for money but for safety. That night, Margaret brewed tea while I helped with dishes. At dinner, Frank mentioned his brother's larger farm 3 states away, always needing help. The offer hung like grace, help without manipulation. I packed that night, took the small money I'd saved, and left Margaret a note. Thank you. Frank. Drove me to a bus station 2 towns over, handed me an envelope of cash, and gave me a letter of introduction to his brother. I traveled to the larger farm. More workers, more anonymity. I volunteered for milking cows, baling hay, fence repair. My body grew stronger and my sleep deeper. Months passed in the rhythm of planting and harvest. I sent Margaret and Frank a postcard with pressed flowers and no return address. They'd given me real kindness. I wanted them to know I was safe. The other farm workers accepted me. Young people seeking agricultural work, each with their own story. I learned to drive tractors, birth calves, predict weather by joint aches, skills earned through sweat, not manipulation. Every new ability reclaimed pieces of myself. One day, I saw a familiar car on the distant road. My heart froze, but it kept moving. The fear was still there, but smaller, manageable. I decided to rebuild my life. I asked the farm owner about school. There was a GED program. He agreed to adjust my schedule. Education would be another escape. At the community college's library, I studied alongside others with interrupted educations. I discovered I was good at explaining things, patient because I knew the sting of being behind. I passed the GED on my second try. The certificate felt heavy in my hands, proof of capability unrelated to tears. I framed it and hung it above the farm garage. Next, I applied for community college, financial aid, grants, forms that felt like a trail back to my past, but I completed them anyway. Acceptance came with spring planting, and I studied child development and educational psychology, ideas planted by Margaret blooming in my mind. I bought a used car with honest wages, the first thing I owned not tainted by manipulation or schemes. I drove to campus with the windows down, feeling something like freedom. Over semesters, I built a real life my parents couldn't touch. I student taught at a rural elementary school, recognizing signs in struggling students: exhaustion, hypervigilance, perfect behavior. I created safe spaces, snacks for the hungry, quiet corners for the overwhelmed. Graduation brought terror, background checks, official records, but I'd built enough of a real history. References vouched for me. I accepted a teaching position, 3 counties over, a balance of distance and connection. In the classroom, I taught reading, writing, and arithmetic, and that each child was more than their circumstances. That education opened doors. That kind adults existed without conditions. Years passed. A master's degree earned through night classes, a small house filled with books and plants, former students graduating and showing me their diplomas. We never spoke of their pasts, but understanding passed between us. Parked on my kitchen table was Victoria's photo, proof that one genuine moment of kindness could ripple into countless others. The pink dress remained filed away in a library basement, a relic of who I once was. The scars and hypervigilance lingered but no longer controlled me. I'd built a life through small choices, choosing to build rather than perform. Now, as I grade papers and prepare lessons, I see troubled students arrive, some obvious, some invisible. I recognize them and offer what was offered to me: tools, possibilities, not rescue. My story has no ending. Life continues forward, one day, one semester, one child at a time. Survival was just the beginning. Freedom came with each choice to be more than what I was forced to be. What happens when a family's darkest secrets are buried beneath monthly confessions and forced repentance? Emma's escape from a twisted tradition of emotional manipulation, violence disguised as love, and a broken system of control sets in motion a chain of events that will change everything. But as she and her cousins plan their freedom, the price of their rebellion will be higher than they ever imagined. Let me know if you'd like to adjust anything. My grandmother forced me to confess imagined sins every full moon while my dad watched, then called me her little helper for making the younger kids cry on command. When I finally opened up about how it broke me, how I used to pinch my own little brother to spare him worse, she smiled and said, "You should be proud. You helped save their souls." I just stared at her. That was 6 years ago. Last night, she locked herself in the basement and cried so quietly, I almost missed it. Every full moon, our entire extended family would gather for the cleansing. Children had to gather in my grandmother's basement and confess every thought, every doubt, every moment of happiness that wasn't centered on the family. Those who didn't cry enough were deemed resistant and faced corrections. I was 7 the first time I understood what corrections meant. My cousin Sarah, 2 years older than me, had smiled during math class because she solved a problem before anyone else. During that month's cleansing, when it was her turn in the circle, she confessed this moment of pride. But she didn't cry. Her Voice stayed steady as she admitted to feeling smart, feeling special for those 30 seconds before remembering that individual achievement was selfishness. Grandma's face went cold. No tears means no true repentance, she said. Sarah disappeared upstairs with 3 aunts. When she came back, her eyes were swollen shut and she couldn't sit properly for a week. After that, we all learned to cry on command. The rules were simple, but impossible. Every joy, every laugh, every good feeling that happened outside family time was a betrayal. Got an A on a test? That was pride. Putting school above blood. Made a friend? That was dividing your loyalty. Enjoyed a song on the radio? You were letting outsiders influence your spirit. But here's what made it truly sick. You also had to confess thoughts you didn't have yet, sins you might commit, doubts that could creep in. If your confession list was too short, that meant you were hiding something too long, and you were reigning in darkness. My little brother Marcus was 5 when he made his first real confession. He'd been happy at recess because he went down the slide fast. That was it. 5 years old and sobbing because sliding made him smile. But his tears weren't desperate enough. Weren't enough. Dad noticed. Dad always noticed when the crying didn't ring true. He's fighting it, Dad told Grandma. The resistance is strong in this one. I knew what that meant. We all knew Marcus was going to face corrections unless his tears became more convincing in the next 30 seconds. I did something then that changed everything. I reached over and pinched Marcus hard on the soft skin under his arm where bruises wouldn't show. He shrieked. Real pain, real tears. The adults nodded approvingly. There it is, Grandma murmured, the spirit breaking through. After that night, I became the pincher. During every cleansing, the younger kids would sit near me, and when their tears weren't enough, I'd help. A twist of skin, a sharp fingernail, whatever it took to keep them from corrections. I collected their pain in small doses to save them from the larger horrors. By 13, I was an expert at the performance. I kept a mental list of fake sins to confess, spacing them out across months so they seemed natural. I practiced crying in the bathroom mirror, learning exactly how to make my voice crack, how to let snot run for authenticity. But the full moons came too fast. Every 28 days, another basement gathering, another circle of confession, another night of measuring tears. Like currency, the worst part was how they made us grateful. After each cleansing, we had to thank them. Thank you for saving me from myself. Thank you for loving me enough to correct my path. Thank you for keeping our family pure. The words tasted like ash, but saying them wrong meant starting the whole process over. My cousin David once mumbled his gratitude. 4 hours later, when the second round of cleansing finally ended, his gratitude was crystal clear. Things escalated when my sister Emma turned 15. She was always the rebellious one, the one who asked why we couldn't just love God without the monthly interrogations. We all knew she was right. During one cleansing, she refused to confess anything, just sat there silent while the family waited. The basement got so quiet you could hear the water heater clicking. I didn't have any impure thoughts, she said finally. I only thought about family all month. It was a lie so bold it took my breath away. Grandma stood up slowly, and I knew Emma had crossed a line none of us had even approached before. They kept her upstairs for 3 hours. The rest of us sat in that basement, continuing our confessions while listening to the footsteps above, the muffled sounds, the sudden silences that were worse than screams. When they brought her back down, Emma was different. Not broken exactly, but careful, measured. She confessed beautifully after that, tears streaming at exactly the right moments. But I saw her keeping count of something on her fingers when she thought no one was looking. Days, maybe, until she turned 18. The October before I turned 16, something went wrong with the basement lights during cleansing. In the darkness, waiting for someone to fix the fuse, I heard my youngest cousin whisper, "I hate this. I hate them." In the black, where no one could see who spoke, other voices joined. Me too. I thought I was the only one. How do we make it stop? Then the lights blazed back on, and we were all crying again, confessing again, playing our parts. But something had shifted in those dark moments. Were we all thinking the same thing? If we wanted to escape, we had to work together. The next morning, I found Emma in the garage organizing old boxes with mechanical precision. She glanced at me, then at the door, then continued sorting. I picked up a box and started helping. Neither of us spoke about the darkness, about the whispers, about the shared hatred that had finally been voiced. Over the next week, I noticed things, small things. David started sitting next to the younger kids during family dinners, casually, blocking them from Grandma's direct line of sight when they forgot to pray before eating. Sarah began creating distractions during pre-cleansing gatherings, spilling drinks or asking elaborate questions about family history that bought others time to compose themselves. Even Marcus, only 8 now, had started warning cousins when adults were approaching. We were protecting each other without ever discussing it, but protection wasn't enough. We all knew that. The breakthrough came 2 weeks later. Emma had been assigned to help Grandma prepare the basement for the next cleansing. I watched her carry down folding chairs, each trip taking longer than necessary. When she finally emerged, she pulled me into the pantry. She pressed something into my hand. A key. The basement door key. I stared at it, understanding immediately. During cleansings, they locked us in. Fire hazard, sure, but family purity came first. Emma had somehow made a copy. That night, I showed David. He studied it like it might disappear, then handed it back. We both knew what this meant. An escape. Route, but also evidence. If they found it, the corrections would be beyond anything we'd experienced. David started mapping the house during gatherings, memorizing which floorboards creaked, which doors stuck, where adults congregated during different times. Sarah documented patterns in her school notebook, disguised as history homework. When adults checked rooms, who went where, how long corrections typically lasted, I became the coordinator. During family meals, I'd tap sequences on the table. 2 taps meant someone needed help with their performance at the next cleansing. 3 meant we needed to meet. 4 meant danger. Abort whatever you were doing. Our first real test came during November's cleansing. Cousin Rachel, just 6, couldn't cry. Her confession about laughing at a cartoon came out flat, emotionless. Grandma's eyes narrowed. I reached for my usual pinching position, but David was faster. He accidentally knocked over his water glass, sending it rolling toward Rachel. The crash made her jump, then genuinely tear up from surprise. It wasn't much, but it was enough to avoid immediate correction. After that, we developed a whole system. Spilled water for sudden scares. Pressure points on the hand that looked like comforting holds, but actually caused sharp pain. Sarah perfected, a way of stepping on toes that appeared completely accidental, but they were getting suspicious. Dad started watching me more closely, especially during my interactions with the younger kids. Aunt Martha began counting how many times water was spilled. Uncle James started checking our arms for marks. Cousin Peter, 11 and desperate to please, had been struggling with corrections for months. His confessions were never quite right, his tears never quite enough. During one particularly brutal session, where he'd been upstairs for 2 hours, we heard him sobbing out words that made my blood freeze. They help each other. They have signals. I've seen them. The basement went silent. Even the water heater seemed to stop clicking. Grandma's footsteps on the stairs were slow, deliberate. She surveyed us all, her face unreadable. Then she smiled. That was worse than anger. How beautiful, she said, that you found ways to support each other's purification. Let's explore this together. They'd announced new procedures, searches before entering the basement, no personal items allowed, and worst of, all corrections would now be immediate. No more upstairs trips. Everything would happen in front of everyone. The night before, I couldn't sleep. Emma's bed was empty, though her window remained closed. I found her in the garage again, but this time she wasn't organizing. She was deciding what to take. I helped her pack 2 changes of clothes, the money she'd saved from birthday cards, a picture of all us cousins from last summer, before Peter's betrayal, before the darkness confession, before everything went wrong. She hugged me at dawn, whispered bus numbers in my ear, made me promise to protect the others. Then she walked to school like any other day and never came home.